What happens when an alpha king mistakes cruelty for strength? Don Lucius Vane had it all: power, wealth, an unshakable throne. But he threw away his destiny the day he rejected his one true mate, Freya, humiliating her and branding her barren in front of the entire kingdom. He exiled her to die in the wastelands, choosing instead his cunning mistress Isabella. 6 years later, he's celebrating the birth of his new heir, Leo. And in a final act of sadistic mockery, he sends Freya an invitation to the pup ceremony, a gilded reminder of everything she failed to give him. But Lucius made one catastrophic mistake. He didn't know. She was already pregnant when he cast her out. And she isn't coming back broken. She's coming back with an army of 3. The envelope was thick, expensive black parchment that smelled faintly of leather and smoke, the scent of the Moonstone Citadel. It felt like a weight in Freya's hand, a stone from a life she had clawed her way out of 6 years ago. It wasn't addressed to Alpha Freya, a title she had earned through blood and survival in the neutral territories. It wasn't even addressed to Ms. Hayes, the name she used in the small border town near her packlands. It was addressed to the Barren reject. Her knuckles went white around the envelope. Even without opening it, she knew who it was from. Only one person was so cruel, so arrogant as to send a letter across 3 territories just to land a blow. The cottage around her seemed to shrink, walls pressing in with the weight of memory. 6 years. 6 years she'd spent building a new life from the wreckage of the old one, and still, the past could reach across the distance and wrap cold fingers around her throat with nothing more than expensive parchment and cruel penmanship. Mama. Freya's posture softened instantly. She dropped the envelope on the worn wooden table of her cottage as if it were burning and turned. Cassius, her eldest by 3 minutes, stood in the doorway rubbing sleep from his eyes. At only 6 years old, he was already tall for his age with a shock of unruly dark hair and a jawline that was a miniature echo of him. "I'm here, baby," she murmured, brushing his hair back. The strands were soft under her fingers, still carrying the warmth of sleep. "Go back to bed. It's not morning yet." "Titus kicked me again," he grumbled, but his eyes were fixed on the envelope. Those eyes, those impossible, damning eyes. "What's that?" "Nothing, Cassius, just junk." He didn't look convinced. His eyes, those impossible burning silver eyes, narrowed with an intelligence that unnerved her sometimes. The unmistakable, damning eyes of the Vane royal bloodline. Eyes that marked him as something more than the son of a rejected mate hiding in the borderlands. "It smells bad," he said, wrinkling his nose. His small nostrils flared, already showing the acute senses that would only sharpen as he grew. "It smells like him." Freya's blood chilled. Her sons had never met Lucius. She had never even told them his name, referred to him only as your father in the vaguest terms when they asked. But the blood knew. The magic that bound them, the triplet alpha bond that was unheard of in generations, knew its origin. They could scent him on the wind, in their dreams, through layers of time and distance and denial. She tucked Cassius back into the small room he shared with his 2 identical brothers, Titus and Magnus. They were tangled together like wolf pups in their shared bed, dark hair and pale skin, and those silver eyes that would flutter open at dawn. Titus murmured something in his sleep, one small hand reaching out to curl around Cassius's wrist the moment he climbed back under the covers. Magnus shifted closer, and within seconds they'd reformed their protective cluster, 3 bodies, 1 unit, unbreakable. Freya stood in the doorway watching them for a long moment, her heart aching with love so fierce it bordered on violence. They were everything. Her reason for surviving those first horrific months in the wastelands. Her motivation for learning to hunt, to fight, to lead. Her proof that she had never been broken, never been defective, never been anything less than whole. She returned to the kitchen. The envelope sat on the table like a coiled snake. Her hand trembled as she broke the silver wax seal embossed with the wolf and crescent moon of the Vane Kingdom. The parchment inside was equally expensive, the calligraphy perfect and cold. "You are hereby commanded by royal decree to attend the naming ceremony of His Royal Highness Prince Leo Vane, firstborn son and true heir to the throne, born of His Majesty Alpha King Don Lucius Vane, and Her Majesty Queen Isabella Vane. Your presence is requested to bear witness to the glorious continuation of the royal line, a blessing the moon goddess bestows only upon the worthy. The words blurred. Freya's jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. The worthy, as if she'd been tested by the goddess and found wanting, as if her exile had been divine judgment rather than one man's cruelty and one woman's manipulation. It was a command, a summons, but the line at the bottom, scrawled in Lucius's sharp, aggressive handwriting, was the real message. Come witness what a true mate provides, Freya. I want you to see what you could never give me. LV. She sank into a chair, the memory hitting her like a physical blow, as fresh and raw as the day it happened. 6 years ago, the Great Hall. She was 22 years old, terrified, and so in love she thought she might burst. The moon goddess had blessed her, a nobody from a small borderland pack, as the true mate of the Alpha King himself. She thought it was destiny. She thought she was chosen. She was wrong. The public rejection, the false diagnosis, Dr. Hale's cold pronouncement before hundreds of witnesses. The Luna is barren. She cannot produce heirs. The words had landed like stones in still water, ripples of shock spreading through the assembled court. Freya remembered the feeling of the floor dropping away beneath her feet, the sensation of drowning while everyone watched. She'd reached for Lucius, some desperate part of her still believing he would defend her, protect her, refuse to accept such a devastating verdict. Instead, his face had gone cold, closed. The warmth she'd thought she'd seen in those ice-blue eyes vanished like it had never existed. Lucius's icy words still echoed in her nightmares. I, Don Lucius Vane, reject you, Freya Ashford, as my mate and Luna. The searing pain of the bond severance. It felt like her chest had been cracked open, her heart torn out, still beating. She'd collapsed on the marble floor, screaming, while the assembled nobles watched with expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction. Isabella had stood beside Lucius, her face a careful mask of concern that didn't quite hide the triumph in her eyes. The guards dragging her through the palace gates. Her knees had scraped raw against stone as they hauled her away. She'd begged Moon Goddess, she'd begged, pleading for mercy, for time, for anyone to believe that something was wrong. No one had listened. No one had cared. The exile into the wastelands with nothing but the clothes on her back. They dumped her at the territory boundary like garbage, the gates slamming shut with brutal finality. She'd stumbled into the wilderness, broken and bleeding, and certain she would die within days. And 3 weeks later, alone in a cave while a storm raged outside, the discovery that would change everything. She was pregnant. She'd thought it was sickness at first. The nausea, the exhaustion, the strange sensitivity to smells. Then she'd missed her cycle. Then another. She'd found a rogue healer in a settlement of exiles and outcasts, an old woman who'd examined her with gentle hands and announced, "You're carrying triplets, child. Strong alpha bloodlines. They'll be extraordinary." Freya had wept for 3 days straight. Grief and rage and terror and desperate. Overwhelming love for the lives growing inside her that Lucius would never know about. Freya looked down at the invitation again, at Lucius's mocking words. A bitter smile curved her lips. He wanted her to see his true family. He wanted her to witness his triumph. He wanted to parade his success in front of the mate he'd discarded, wanted to grind her face in the evidence of her supposed inadequacy. Fine. She would come, but not alone and not broken. She folded the invitation carefully, her hands steady now, and stood. The fear and pain had crystallized into something harder, sharper, purpose. She moved to the bedroom door where 3 identical boys now stood watching her with matching silver eyes, intelligent, protective, and far too perceptive for their age. They must have woken when they felt her distress through the bond they shared. The triplet connection was powerful, primal. When one hurt, they all felt it. "Mama," Titus asked quietly, his analytical mind already working through the possibilities. "Are we going somewhere?" Freya looked at her sons, her miracles, her warriors, her proof that she was never broken, and felt something fierce and unshakable settle in her chest. "Yes, my loves," she said softly, kneeling to their eye level. She gathered them close, breathing in their scent, milk and honey and the wild, clean smell of young wolves. "We're going to pay someone a visit, and we're going to show him exactly what he threw away." Magnus, the youngest and fiercest, grinned with too many teeth. "Are we going to see him?" The word carried weight, emphasis. They'd always known there was a him, a father-shaped absence in their lives. "Yes," Freya whispered, her hand cupping Magnus's fierce little face. "It's time your father learned the truth." Cassius's jaw set with determination beyond his years. "When do we leave?" "We're going to the Moonstone Citadel," she announced, unfolding the invitation and smoothing it flat on the table. The royal seal glinted in the lamplight. "Your father is having a ceremony for his new son, and he's invited us to attend." The words hung in the air. Her sons processed this information with varying expressions. Cassius's protective anger, Titus's calculating assessment of risk, Magnus's eager bloodlust. "We're going to show him," Cassius said, straightening to his full height. "We're going to show him the truth," Titus added quietly, his mind already working through strategies and contingencies. Magnus bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. "I want to see his face when he realizes." Freya pulled her sons close, breathing in their scent, pack, family, home, the only home that mattered anymore. "Then we'd better start packing. We leave at dawn." The Alpha King wanted to mock her with his perfect family. Fine. She'd show him exactly what he'd thrown away when he called her Barren and cast her into the wilderness to die. She'd show him his true heirs, 3 of them, alive and strong and bearing his own damning bloodline in their eyes. And then she'd walk away and leave him with nothing but the ashes of his choices. The wooden floorboard beneath Freya's bed came up easily after 6 years of practice. The nails had been carefully loosened, the edges worn smooth from repeated access. Inside the hollow space lay a leather satchel, carefully wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture and time. Her hands were steady now as she pulled out the documents that would destroy Lucius's carefully constructed lies. The original medical records, sealed by Dr. Hale before Isabella got to him. She'd stolen them the night before her exile, some instinct telling her to preserve the truth even when it seemed pointless. The fertility tests showing normal hormone levels, healthy reproductive function, no abnormalities. The blood work proving she was in her prime breeding years. Every measurement, every test result, all clearly indicating a Luna fully capable of bearing heirs. 3 birth certificates issued by a rogue physician in the borderlands, each bearing the unmistakable genetic markers. Silver eyes, alpha blood, vein paternal lineage documented in careful script. The doctor had been an exile himself, a good man who'd run afoul of corrupt pack politics. He'd helped her deliver her sons in a cabin during a blizzard, had cleaned them and weighed them, and officially recorded their existence when no one else would. The DNA analysis she'd paid for with the last of her savings, scientific proof that would stand up in any pack court. She'd traveled 3 territories over to find a lab that could perform the test without asking questions. The results were definitive, irrefutable, stamped with official seals that couldn't be dismissed as forgery. She laid them on the table like weapons in an arsenal. Because that's what they were, ammunition for a war she hadn't started but fully intended to finish. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 in the morning. The world outside was silent save for the occasional hoot of an owl. Freya made herself coffee, bitter and black, and sat in the darkness thinking through every possible outcome of what she was about to do. Best case, Lucius would be forced to acknowledge his sons, to accept the truth of what he'd done. The kingdom would see Isabella's treachery exposed. Justice, if not reconciliation. Worst case, Lucius would have them killed. He could claim they were frauds, liars, threats to his throne. He could order their execution and there would be no one powerful enough to stop him. The rational part of Freya's mind whispered that she should destroy the invitation, pack up her sons, and disappear deeper into the neutral territories where even a king's reach couldn't find them. They'd survived this long. They could keep surviving. But survival wasn't living, and her sons deserved better than to grow up hiding, to carry the shame of rejection they'd done nothing to earn. "Elder Miriam," she said into her phone an hour later, her voice low. The old woman answered on the third ring, voice rough with sleep. "Who is this?" "It's Freya Ashford. I need your help." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Freya's heart began to hammer. She could hear breathing, the rustle of fabric as Miriam sat up in bed. Then, "I wondered if you were still alive, child. I prayed you were." Emotion clogged Freya's throat. Miriam had been the only elder to question the diagnosis that day, the only voice raised in doubt before being shouted down by Isabella's supporters. She'd stood in that throne room and called the proceedings suspect, had demanded a second opinion, had asked why Dr. Hale seemed so nervous. "I'm alive," Freya said, "and I have 3 sons, his sons." Another pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "Moon goddess, he's summoned you to the ceremony, hasn't he? The arrogant fool." "How did you?" "Because I know Lucius Vane. I was there when he was born, when he took his first shift, when he ascended to the throne. I know his pride, his cruelty, his need to prove himself superior." Miriam's voice hardened. "He would absolutely summon you just to gloat. The man has no idea he's lit his own funeral pyre." "Will you come, bear witness for me?" "I'll be there," Miriam promised. "It's time the truth came to light. And child, bring those boys of yours. Let the kingdom see what their king threw away." They talked for another hour, Miriam advising her on protocol, on how to enter the citadel, on which council members might be sympathetic and which were Isabella's creatures. By the time they hung up, the first gray light of dawn was creeping through the windows. Freya hadn't slept, but she didn't need to. She was running on something stronger than rest, purpose, rage, and the bone-deep certainty that she was about to change everything. That afternoon, Freya gathered her sons in the small training yard behind their cottage. The space was barely 20 feet square, packed dirt surrounded by a wooden fence. But it was theirs. They'd sparred here, trained here, learned to control their strength and speed here. "Listen carefully," she said, crouching to their eye level. 3 pairs of silver eyes focused on her with absolute attention. "When we enter that throne room, every eye will be on you. You must control your auras, keep them steady. Stand tall, speak clearly. Can you do that?" Cassius nodded immediately, his small shoulders squaring. "Yes, Mama." Titus frowned in concentration, already running through scenarios in his mind. "What if he tries to hurt you?" "He won't." Freya kept her voice confident even though she couldn't be certain. "Not in front of the entire court. He'll want to maintain his image." Magnus bounced on his toes, eager for the challenge. "And if he does try something?" "Then you run, all 3 of you together. You don't fight, you don't argue, you run back to Elder Miriam and she'll protect you." Freya gripped Magnus's shoulders. "Promise me, if things go wrong, you run." "We're not going to beg," Freya continued, her voice firm. "We're not going to ask for his love or his acceptance. Do you understand? This isn't about winning a father. This is about showing the kingdom the truth, that we exist, that we're strong, and that he was wrong." "We're doing this for you, Mama," Titus said quietly. "For what he did to you." Freya's eyes burned, but she didn't let herself cry. "We're doing this because it's right, because lies shouldn't stand, because you 3 deserve to be acknowledged." They practiced for hours, standing in formation, shoulders back, chins lifted, making eye contact without flinching. Cassius recited his line over and over. "Hello, Father." 2 simple words that would detonate like a bomb in that throne room. She made them practice their breathing, their posture, the way they would walk. They needed to move as one unit, a unified front. 3 small boys who looked identical but had distinct personalities. Cassius the protector, Titus the thinker, Magnus the warrior. She taught them to let those personalities show, to be themselves fully and without apology. As twilight fell, Freya spread crimson fabric across her kitchen table and began to sew. Her mother had taught her this skill when she was young, sitting at a similar table in a cottage much like this one, never imagining Freya would use it to dress her sons for a confrontation with a king. 3 identical suits took shape under her hands. Black trousers with crisp seams, white shirts with pearl buttons, tiny bow ties the color of blood or rubies or revenge. She'd chosen the red deliberately, let Lucius see them coming. Let there be no doubt they were there by choice, not by submission. The stitching was perfect. Each seam straight, each hem exactly measured. This was armor as much as clothing, protection woven with thread and determination. Her own dress hung on the door, crimson silk that would make her impossible to miss, impossible to ignore. The neckline was modest, but the fit was precise, showing the strength she'd built from years of survival. She'd commissioned it from a seamstress in the border town, spending money she couldn't afford because the message mattered more than the cost. When she tried it on that night, checking the fit one final time, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. The girl who'd been dragged from the citadel was gone. In her place stood a woman with scars and sharp edges, someone who'd survived the unsurvivable and come out harder for it. The night before they were to leave, sleep was impossible. Freya sat on the porch steps staring at the stars, doubt creeping in like frost. What if this went wrong? What if Lucius simply had them killed? What if she was leading her children into danger for the sake of her own wounded pride? The door creaked. Cassius sat beside her, his small hand finding hers. His skin was warm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You're scared," he observed, not a question. "Yes," she admitted. There was no point in lying to him. Her sons knew her too well, felt her emotions too clearly through their bond. "I'm terrified." "Don't be." His silver eyes caught the moonlight, ancient and knowing in his young face. "We're with you, Mama, always." Titus emerged next, settling on her other side. "You've kept us safe our whole lives. Now it's our turn." Magnus climbed onto her lap despite being almost too big for it, his fierce little face pressed against her chest. "We're not scared of him." Freya pulled them close, and they sat there under the vast night sky, 4 souls bound by blood and love and shared survival. The moon above was waning, but still bright enough to cast shadows. Wolves were creatures of the moon, subject to its pull and power. Tomorrow they would walk into the citadel under that same moon's watchful gaze. "Tell us the story," Magnus requested, his voice muffled against her dress. It was their ritual, the story she'd told them since they were old enough to understand. The story of how she'd survived, how she'd brought them into the world against impossible odds. "The moon was full the night you were born," Freya began, her voice soft. "It was the coldest winter in 50 years. I was alone in a cabin that barely had walls, and the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see 3 feet in front of me." "But you weren't scared," Cassius prompted. "I was terrified," Freya corrected. "I was in labor with triplets, alone, with no idea if we'd survive the night. But then I felt you, all 3 of you, fighting to live. And I realized I couldn't give up because you weren't giving up." "Dr. Tobias came," Titus added. He'd heard this story 100 times, but never tired of it. "Dr. Tobias came," Freya confirmed. "Through the storm because somehow he knew I needed help. And he delivered you one by one. Cassius first, screaming loud enough to wake the dead. Then Titus, quiet and watchful even as a newborn. Then Magnus, tiny but fierce, already trying to bite the doctor's finger." Magnus giggled against her chest. "And when you were all cleaned and bundled and nursing, Dr. Tobias looked at me and said, 'These boys are blessed. The moon goddess has marked them for something extraordinary.' And I knew he was right." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just breathing together. Finally, Titus spoke. "Tomorrow is going to change everything, isn't it?" Freya didn't insult him with a comforting lie. "Yes, everything changes tomorrow." "Good," Cassius said firmly. "We're ready." Were they? Freya looked at her 6-year-old sons, so young, so vulnerable, but already showing the strength and courage that would define them. They were ready. The question was whether she was ready to face Lucius again, ready to stand in the throne room where she'd been humiliated and destroyed, ready to risk her son's safety for the sake of truth and justice. But as she looked at Cassius's determined jaw, Titus's intelligent eyes, Magnus's fierce little face, she realized she didn't have a choice. They deserved better than hiding. They deserved to be acknowledged, to claim their birthright, to stand in the light instead of the shadows. "We should sleep," she said finally, though she knew none of them would. "Tomorrow we show the kingdom who we are." They filed back inside. her sons moving to their shared bed while Freya lay in hers, staring at the ceiling and counting the hours until dawn. Tomorrow the Alpha King would learn what he'd thrown away. Tomorrow the lies would crumble. Tomorrow everything changed. The landscape changed as they traveled north, familiar and foreign all at once. Freya hadn't seen these roads in 6 years, hadn't smelled the distinctive pine and stone scent of the northern territories. Everything looked smaller somehow, less magnificent than her terrified memories had painted it. The old highways were the same, cracked pavement lined with evergreens that seemed to close in overhead like a tunnel. They passed through small towns she vaguely remembered, settlements that paid tribute to the Moonstone Pack, borderland communities that survived by staying beneath the notice of powerful alphas. Some of the towns looked prosperous. New buildings, busy markets, signs of growth and stability. Others looked worse than she remembered. Boarded windows, empty streets, the desperate air of communities slowly dying. Cassius sat pressed against the car window, watching the forests blur past with hungry eyes. He'd never been this far from their cottage. None of them had. The world was bigger than they'd imagined, full of possibilities and dangers they could only guess at. Titus had fallen asleep with his head on Magnus's shoulder, exhausted from a restless night. Magnus traced patterns in the condensation on the glass, wolves and moons and symbols that looked almost like ancient pack runes. "Mama, what was he like?" Magnus asked suddenly, his voice quiet enough not to wake Titus. "Before." Freya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you mean? Was he always cruel, or did something change him?" It was a perceptive question, the kind that made her remember Magnus was only 6 in years, not in understanding. "I don't know," she admitted. "When I met him, I thought he was everything. Powerful, confident, destined. The mate bond made me see him through rose-colored glasses." "But was he kind?" Freya thought back, trying to separate memory from the pain that followed. "Sometimes he could be gentle. He laughed at my jokes. He listened when I talked about my dreams." She paused, but there was always something cold underneath, a hardness. I thought it was strength. I didn't realize it was cruelty until it was too late. "I'm going to be stronger than him," Magnus declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You already are, baby. All 3 of you are." They'd been traveling for 8 hours, stopping only once for food and bathroom breaks. Freya had packed sandwiches and water, knowing they couldn't afford to draw attention at restaurants or rest stops. 3 identical silver-eyed boys tended to be memorable. "We're crossing the border now," Freya said softly, as they passed beneath an archway of ancient pines, marking the entrance to Moonstone Pack lands. The moment they crossed the invisible line, pain exploded through Freya's chest. She gasped, one hand flying to her sternum as the phantom mate bond flared to agonizing life. Even severed, even broken, the magic recognized Lucius's territory and reached for him with ghostly fingers. It felt like being torn in half all over again, like 6 years of healing had never happened. "Mama," Magnus lurched forward, his small hands on her shoulder. Freya forced herself to breathe through it, knuckles white on the steering wheel. She swerved slightly, corrected, pulled the car onto the shoulder. I'm okay. The lie tasted bitter. Titus woke instantly, his analytical gaze assessing her pale face and labored breathing. Without a word, all 3 boys moved closer, their small hands finding hers, their presence a grounding weight. The bond might pull toward Lucius, but her sons anchored her to the present, to survival, to purpose. "Does it always hurt like this?" Cassius asked, his young face troubled. "Only when I'm close to him. The severed bond recognizes his territory." Freya managed a weak smile. "It'll pass, give me a minute." But it didn't pass. The pain dulled to a persistent ache, a constant reminder that she was walking back into the territory that had rejected her, toward the man who'd chosen cruelty over truth. She drove slowly now, hyper-aware of every mile that brought them closer to the Moonstone Citadel. The landscape grew more manicured, more controlled. These were the inner territories, directly overseen by the Alpha King. The roads were better maintained. The towns were larger, more prosperous. This was the heart of Lucius's kingdom, the paradise he'd built while she and his sons struggled to survive in the wastelands. The Moonstone Citadel appeared on the horizon like a pale scar against the darkening sky. Carved from white stone that seemed to glow in the fading light, it rose in elegant, brutal towers, a fortress masquerading as a palace. Guard towers flanked the main gates. Banners bearing the silver wolf and crescent moon snapped in the wind with sharp cracks that echoed across the distance. Freya's hands trembled on the wheel. She'd walked these grounds as a naive girl drunk on destiny and love. She'd danced in those ballrooms, believing she'd found her home. She'd been dragged through those gates bleeding and broken, certain she would die within days. Every stone held a memory, every shadow a ghost of who she'd been. "It's big," Cassius observed, his voice carefully neutral. "It's cold," Titus added, and Freya realized he wasn't talking about temperature. Even from a distance, the citadel radiated power and isolation, beautiful and merciless. "It's a prison," Magnus said quietly, "even if you're the king." Freya glanced at her youngest son, surprised by the observation. But he was right. The citadel was magnificent and suffocating, a cage made of marble and duty and impossible expectations. She drove past the citadel to a small inn at the territory's edge, neutral ground where travelers and merchants stayed. The innkeeper's eyes widened when she saw Freya's face, recognition and shock warring across her weathered features. But she said nothing, just handed over the key with shaking hands. "Do you need anything else?" the innkeeper asked, her voice cautious. "No, thank you." The woman nodded and disappeared back behind her counter, but Freya could feel her eyes following them as they climbed the stairs. Their room was simple: 2 beds with worn quilts, a small bathroom with dated fixtures, a window overlooking the citadel in the distance. It smelled of lemon cleaning solution and old wood. Not unpleasant, just impersonal. A place for people passing through, not staying. Freya helped her sons into their pajamas, tucked them into one bed where they immediately tangled together like puppies seeking warmth and comfort. She kissed each forehead, Cassius, Titus, Magnus, and stood at the window staring at the place that haunted her nightmares. The citadel was lit now, windows glowing gold against the deepening darkness. Somewhere in that fortress, Lucius was preparing for tomorrow's ceremony. Was he thinking about her? Did he remember the invitation he'd sent, the cruel words scrawled across expensive parchment? Or had she become so insignificant in his mind that he'd forgotten her entirely? Tomorrow at noon, the ceremony would begin. Tomorrow, she would walk through those gates not as a rejected mate crawling back, but as an alpha in her own right with 3 living proofs of Lucius's greatest mistake. She practiced in the mirror after the boys fell asleep, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was 8 weeks pregnant when you exiled me." Stand tall, shoulders back. "These are your sons, Cassius, Titus, and Magnus." Clear voice, steady gaze. "You threw away everything for a lie." Her reflection stared back, platinum hair that she'd grown long again, sharp cheekbones carved by years of struggle, eyes that had seen too much and survived anyway. She barely recognized herself from the girl who'd loved him so desperately. That girl had been soft, hopeful, eager to please. This woman was hard edges and cold determination. That girl was dead. Tomorrow, Freya would make sure Lucius understood that he was the one who killed her. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her sons breathe in their tangled pile across the room. Cassius snored softly. Titus muttered something incomprehensible. Magnus shifted position, one small arm flung across his brother's. Sleep didn't come. Freya lay there counting the hours, feeling the phantom bond pulse with each heartbeat, until finally the first gray light of dawn crept through the curtains. It was time. The morning light filtered through threadbare curtains as Freya's fingers fumbled with the tiny buttons on Magnus's crimson vest. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking despite every attempt at control. She'd faced rogue wolves, survived winters in the wastelands, built a pack from nothing. But dressing her sons to meet the father who'd thrown them away before they were born felt like stepping off a cliff blindfolded. "Mama, you're crying," Titus observed. his analytical mind cataloging every detail even at 6 years old. She hadn't realized. Freya swiped at her cheeks, wetness coming away on her fingertips. Forcing steadiness into her voice, she said, "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're proud, and I'm so proud of you three." "We're not going to disappoint you," Cassius promised, his jaw set with adult determination in his child's face. "You couldn't," Freya whispered, "ever." She smoothed Magnus's collar, adjusted Titus's bow tie, ran her fingers through Cassius's unruly hair one last time. They looked perfect. Like princes, though none of them had been raised with that title or privilege. The crimson suits were striking against their pale skin and dark hair, the blood-red fabric a declaration. "We are here. You cannot ignore us." Freya dressed last, the crimson silk sliding over her skin like water. The dress fit perfectly. She'd checked 100 times but still felt exposed, vulnerable. She braided her platinum hair into a crown, applied minimal makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes, and stared at herself in the mirror. "You are not the broken girl he destroyed," she told her reflection. "You are what survived her death." The drive to the Citadel felt both endless and far too short. Her sons were silent in the backseat, processing their own fears and excitement. The morning was gray and overcast, clouds pregnant with potential rain. Appropriate weather for what was about to unfold. As they approached the gates, 2 guards stepped forward, hands moving to weapons with practiced ease. One of them Moon Goddess, she remembered him, Captain Reese, who'd once smiled at her in the corridors, went pale as death when he saw her face. You can't be." Freya held up the invitation, letting sunlight catch the royal seal. Her voice came out colder than she'd intended, frosted with 6 years of survival. "Your king summoned me. I'm here." Reese's gaze dropped to the 3 boys standing at her sides, identical silver eyes burning with unmistakable vain fire. Understanding crashed across his features like a wave. His hand fell from his weapon. "Sweet Moon Goddess." "Let us pass." They did, gates grinding open to admit what they'd cast out 6 years ago. The walk from the outer gates to the main hall felt like miles. Freya's heels clicked against cobblestones she'd once walked barefoot on summer nights. Servants pressed against walls as they passed, staring with open mouths. Word would spread through the Citadel like wildfire. The rejected mate has returned. She's brought children. They have his eyes. The great hall's doors stood open, ceremony already underway. Perfect. Freya had timed this precisely, late enough that every noble in the kingdom would be assembled, early enough to make an entrance that would burn itself into their memories forever. She paused at the threshold, drinking in the scene she'd been exiled from. Golden chandeliers dripped light like honey. Nobles in their finest silks lined the aisle in glittering rows, peacocks preening in their wealth and status. The throne dais rose at the far end, majestic and terrible, and there. Lucius. 6 years had only made him more devastating. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the unconscious grace of someone who'd never questioned his right to rule. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples now. Those ice-blue eyes that had once looked at her with hunger now soft with paternal pride. He held a bundle of white silk and lace, baby Leo, while Isabella stood beside him in a gown that probably cost more than Freya's cottage, radiant with triumph. Lucius's voice carried through the hall, rich and commanding. "And so I present to you the future of our kingdom, the blessed continuation of the Vane bloodline." A guard approached the dais, leaning in to whisper urgently in his ear. Freya watched the exact moment Lucius's composure cracked. His head snapped toward the entrance. His words died mid-sentence. For one suspended heartbeat, their eyes met across the crowded hall, her nightmares colliding with his present. The phantom bond flared between them, violent and agonizing. Freya felt it like a hook in her chest, pulling, demanding, trying to bridge 6 years of severance with ghostly fingers. She saw him feel it too, saw him flinch as though struck. Recognition, shock, then something that might have been fear before pride slammed down like a gate. He could have her removed. He could pretend she didn't exist, have the guards drag her out before she made a scene. Instead, cruelty won. That old, familiar cruelty that wanted to display his victory, to grind her face in everything she'd failed to give him. His lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lucius raised one hand, silencing the confused murmurs rippling through the crowd. Let her enter. The massive oak doors swung wide. Freya stepped forward into a shaft of sunlight, backlit and powerful crimson silk catching fire in the golden light. And on either side of her, matching her stride for stride, 3 sons in blood-red suits, silver eyes blazing, unmistakably, undeniably vain. The collective gasp hit like a physical wave. Someone dropped a glass. The crystal shattered against marble, the sound sharp and final in the stunned silence. "Moon goddess preserve us," someone whispered. Freya walked forward, and the world seemed to slow down around her. Freya's heels clicked against marble like a countdown. Each step down the central aisle felt like walking through water, through time, through every nightmare that had kept her awake for 6 years. The sea of nobility parted before her, silk gowns rustling, jeweled hands rising to cover shocked mouths. The scent of their fear and confusion was intoxicating. The whispers started as a murmur and built to a roar. Is that the rejected mate? She's supposed to be dead. Who are those children? Look at their eyes. Oh gods, those eyes. Freya kept her gaze fixed on the dais, on Lucius's frozen form. She could feel his stare like a physical touch, could practically hear the thoughts racing behind those ice-blue eyes as he tried to reconcile the broken girl he'd discarded with the woman striding toward him dressed in blood and vengeance. Isabella's shrill voice cut through the chaos like breaking glass. "Guards, remove that traitor!" Her perfect face twisted with fury, one hand clutching Lucius's arm with desperate force. "She has no right to be here. She was exiled, this is." But Lucius raised his hand, and every guard in the room froze. His ice-blue eyes locked on Freya with something that might have been curiosity, might have been cruelty, might have been the first stirrings of dread. "No!" His voice carried across the stunned silence, cold and amused. "Let her come." He wanted this. Wanted to see her break at the foot of his throne, wanted to watch her witness his perfect family, his legitimate heir, everything she'd supposedly failed to give him. The arrogance of him, the absolute certainty that he was in control, made Freya's blood sing with vindication. Behind her, 3 sets of footsteps matched her rhythm with military precision. Cassius, Titus, Magnus, her warriors, her truth, her revenge wrapped in crimson silk and 6-year-old determination. She felt their presence like anchors, steady and unwavering even as her own heart threatened to hammer out of her chest. "Moon goddess," someone breathed. "Those boys. They're all identical. The eyes. They have the vain eyes." The whispers grew louder, more frantic, nobles putting pieces together and arriving at impossible conclusions. Freya could see the moment understanding rippled through the crowd, shock transforming into something more volatile. Scandal, threat, the kind of revelation that toppled kingdoms. Closer now, 20 feet from the dais. Close enough to see the details. Isabella's diamond tiara catching light like broken glass, baby Leo's sleeping face innocent of the chaos about to erupt, Lucius's strong hands cradling his supposed heir with surprising gentleness. 15 feet, close enough for him to see her clearly, to recognize what 6 years of survival had forged from the broken girl he'd discarded. The softness was gone. The naivete was gone. What remained was sharp edges and cold purpose. 10 feet, close enough to smell him, cedar and smoke and something uniquely alpha, a scent that had haunted her dreams and nightmares in equal measure. His gaze dropped to the children flanking her. Freya watched the exact moment everything changed. Confusion flickered across Lucius's face as he took in 3 identical boys in matching suits. His brow furrowed. Who were they? Why were they with her? And why did they look so? Then his eyes met theirs, really met them, and recognition hit like a physical blow. Those eyes, burning silver, ancient and unmistakable, the vain bloodline trait that hadn't appeared in generations until Lucius himself was born. eyes that had marked him as chosen by the moon goddess for kingship, proof of his pure alpha lineage. Now multiplied by 3. The color drained from Lucius's face. His breath caught audibly. The baby in his arms seemed to grow heavier, a weight he could no longer bear. The boys stopped at the base of the dais in perfect formation, exactly as they'd practiced. As one, they lifted their chins, shoulders back, meeting their father's gaze with the kind of steady confidence that couldn't be taught, only inherited. 3 living mirrors of the man who'd thrown them away, standing in judgment at the foot of his throne. Cassius stood tallest, protective instinct written in every line of his small body. His jaw was set, his silver eyes unwavering. This was the eldest, the natural leader, the one who would stand between his family and any threat. Titus's analytical gaze cataloged every detail of the man before him: height, build, expression, body language. Processing, calculating, understanding. This was the thinker, the strategist, the one who would see through lies and manipulation. Magnus's jaw set with fierce determination that promised future reckoning. His small hands clenched at his sides, barely restraining the urge to bare his teeth. This was the warrior, the one who would never forgive, never forget. 3 pieces of Lucius himself, standing in accusation. Lucius's goblet slipped from his fingers. Red wine exploded across white marble in a spreading stain that looked exactly like blood, like violence, like the truth finally spilling out after 6 years of lies. The liquid crept across pristine stone, reaching toward Freya's feet like an offering or an omen. The entire kingdom held its breath. And Freya smiled, not with warmth, not with forgiveness, but with the cold satisfaction of someone who'd survived impossible odds and returned to collect a debt. The smile said everything. You didn't break me, you made me stronger, and now you're going to pay. Cassius stepped forward, one small foot moving ahead of his brothers with the kind of courage that broke and rebuilt Freya's heart simultaneously. His voice rang out clear and unwavering, carrying to every corner of the great hall with surprising power for a 6-year-old child. "Hello, Father." 2 words, simple, devastating, undeniable. The silence shattered like dropped crystal. The court erupted. Nobles surged forward, voices overlapping in shock and disbelief. Elderly council members clutched their chests, faces going purple with outrage or excitement. Young wolves stared with hunger at the drama unfolding, practically salivating at the scandal. Someone was shouting for order. Someone else was praying to the moon goddess. A woman near the back fainted, her companion barely catching her before she hit the floor. Isabella's shriek cut through it all, hysterical and sharp. "It's impossible. She's barren. The physician confirmed it." She thrust baby Leo toward a servant with such force the woman stumbled, and rounded on Freya with wild eyes. "Those children are frauds. She's trying to steal what's rightfully ours. She's probably hired actors, bastards from some other pack. Lies, all lies." But no one was listening to Isabella. Every eye in the room was fixed on the 3 boys and the undeniable truth written in their faces, their posture, their eyes. Lucius hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. His knuckles were white against the throne's armrests, every muscle locked rigid as though movement might shatter him completely. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely controlled, a thin veneer over something explosive. "Explain, now." Freya met his gaze without flinching, her voice steady and clear and cold as winter. "I was 8 weeks pregnant when you exiled me, Lucius. 8 weeks carrying your sons, your true heirs, while you called me defective and threw me away to die in the wastelands." "No," the word came out harsh, disbelieving. He shook his head as though he could physically reject the truth. "The physician confirmed you were barren. Dr. Hale examined you himself. The entire court witnessed his findings." "Did he?" Freya's smile was razor-sharp. "Or did someone pay him to lie?" The implication hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. Every head in the room turned, seeking, finding. There, half hidden behind a column of nobles, Dr. Hale stood pale as death itself. His expensive robes suddenly looked too heavy, his carefully maintained composure crumbling as hundreds of eyes fixed on him with accusation and demand. He tried to shrink further into the shadows, but there was nowhere to hide. Not anymore. Lucius rose from his throne, and the movement rippled through the room like a shockwave. His alpha presence expanded, oppressive and undeniable, the weight of a king's rage barely leashed. The temperature seemed to drop. Wolves throughout the hall felt their instincts scream to submit, to bow, to get small before the fury of their alpha. "Doctor," his voice dropped to something deadly quiet, more terrifying than any shout. "Come forward. Explain the diagnosis you gave 6 years ago." Dr. Hale didn't move. Couldn't move. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, trapped between truth and the lies that had bought him a fortune and 6 years of guilt-ridden nights. That was a command. Lucius's alpha authority slammed through the room like a physical force, and every wolf in attendance felt their knees want to buckle. The power of a true alpha king, undiluted and terrible. "Come, forward." Dr. Hale stumbled forward on shaking legs, nearly tripping over his own robes. His face glistened with sweat despite the cool temperature, his hands trembling as he climbed the dais steps. He stopped well short of Lucius, as though proximity to the king might ignite him. His eyes darted desperately to Isabella, seeking rescue, finding only cold calculation in her expression as she weighed whether to save him or let him burn. "The examination," Lucius said softly, dangerously, each word precisely enunciated, controlled, the kind of control that preceded violence. "6 years ago, you declared my mate Barren before the entire court. You staked your medical license and your honor on that diagnosis." Dr. Hale's throat worked. "I, my king, I." "Did you lie?" The question hung like an executioner's blade. Freya watched the physician crumble, watched 6 years of carefully constructed deception begin to collapse under the weight of 3 silver-eyed boys and 1 king's slowly dawning horror. Dr. Hale's voice cracked. He looked around desperately, finding no allies, no escape. "I can explain." "That's not an answer." Lucius descended the dais steps, each footfall echoing through the silent hall. "Did you lie?" Dr. Hale collapsed under the weight of Lucius's alpha command like a puppet with cut strings. His knees hit marble with a crack that echoed through the silent hall, bone meeting stone with enough force to bruise. Words spilled from him in gasping, shameful torrents, confession pouring out like poison he'd held too long, toxic and burning. "She came to me," he choked out, not meeting anyone's eyes. "Lady Isabella, 3 days before the examination. She came to my clinic after dark, alone, wearing a hooded cloak." The court leaned forward collectively, hungry for the truth they'd been denied. "She offered me 50,000 gold pieces to falsify the results." The court's collective inhale was audible, a sharp sound of shock and horrified fascination. "I refused at first." Dr. Hale's voice was pleading now, desperate. "I swore oaths when I became a physician. I had my honor, my reputation. I told her I wouldn't do it, that she needed to leave." "But you did do it," Lucius said flatly. "She showed me drawings." Dr. Hale's voice cracked, tears streaming down his face now. "Sketches of my daughter, my wife, detailed images of their daily routines, where they walked, when they were alone, which roads they took to the market. She spread them across my desk like cards in a game." Freya's hands clenched at her sides. She'd suspected manipulation, bribery, perhaps threats. But hearing it confirmed, knowing Isabella had orchestrated everything with such calculated, thorough cruelty, made her want to tear the woman apart with her bare hands. She said accidents happen so easily to families who don't cooperate. She described how my daughter might fall down the stairs, how my wife might accidentally ingest poison meant for rats. She said it with a smile, like she was discussing the weather. Dr. Hale was openly sobbing now. "I had no choice. They would have killed them." "You had a choice," Lucius said coldly. "You chose your family over your honor, over your king, over an innocent woman and the heirs she carried." "I falsified the fertility report," Dr. Hale continued, trembling violently. "Declared Luna Freya barren when every test showed normal, healthy reproductive function. Her hormone levels were perfect. Her cycle was regular. There was nothing wrong with her." The crowd's murmur grew hostile, attention shifting like a predator scenting weakness. But Isabella wanted more. Dr. Hale's voice dropped to a whisper. She gave me poison, something to ensure permanent infertility if the falsified report wasn't enough. A compound that would destroy reproductive tissue gradually over several weeks. She told me to administer it during the examination, to inject it while pretending to take blood samples. Mother of God, someone breathed. I couldn't. Dr. Hale looked up finally, meeting Lucius's eyes with desperate pleading. Moon goddess, forgive me, I falsified the report, but I couldn't poison her. I gave her harmless supplements instead, vitamins and mineral compounds. I kept the poison, locked it away in my safe. I have it still if you need proof. His voice broke completely. I had no idea. I swear on my daughter's life, I had no idea she was already pregnant. If I'd known, I would have. I don't know what I would have done, but I never would have let them exile her if I'd known. Lies. Isabella's shriek was desperate, feral. She lunged toward the doctor, guards catching her arms before she could reach him. He's lying to save himself. The man's a drunk, everyone knows it. His word means nothing. He's been paid by her to say these things to destroy me. But Isabella's desperation only made her words ring hollow. The court could see the truth written on Dr. Hale's face, hear it in his broken sobs. Freya reached into her dress pocket with steady hands and produced a leather folder. She'd kept it close to her body all morning, feeling its weight like armor. Original medical records, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. Sealed by Dr. Hale himself before Isabella got to him. Fertility tests, hormone levels, reproductive function analysis. All normal. All authenticated with the royal medical seal that only physicians sworn to the crown can use. She handed them to the nearest council member, Elder Corwin, who'd once been kind to her in passing. She watched them pass from hand to hand, each reader's face growing darker with understanding, shock transforming into outrage. I witnessed the rejection. Elder Miriam emerged from the crowd, her aged voice strong with conviction. She'd been standing near the back, waiting for this moment. I questioned the diagnosis that day. The timing was suspicious, 3 days between examination and public rejection, and such a severe, absolute diagnosis delivered so quickly. In my 50 years of practice, I'd never seen a case handled so strangely. She walked forward, her cane tapping against marble with measured rhythm. Despite her age, her bearing commanded respect. I raised my concerns before the council. I demanded a second opinion, another examination by neutral physicians. I questioned why Dr. Hale seemed so nervous, why he wouldn't meet the Luna's eyes, why his hands shook when he delivered his findings. Miriam's gaze swept the assembled nobles with withering contempt. I was stripped of my position for it, called a troublemaker, exiled to the outer territories for daring to question the narrative being constructed. The crowd's murmur grew hostile, attention shifting from Freya to Isabella, like wolves, scenting weakness in the pack. Lucius stood frozen, his face a landscape of dawning horror. Everything, his justification, his choices, his righteous anger at being denied heirs, all of it built on manufactured lies. The foundation of his new life was crumbling beneath him, revealing rot and decay underneath the pristine surface. Why? The word came out broken, barely more than a whisper. He turned to Isabella with something raw and wounded in his eyes. Why would you do this? Isabella's carefully maintained mask finally shattered. Her beautiful face twisted with something ugly and desperate, all pretense of innocence abandoned. Because she was weak, a nobody from a borderland pack who couldn't give you what you needed. She was my mate, Lucius said quietly. She was inadequate. Isabella's voice rose to a shriek. Look at her. Common blood, common features, common everything. She would have borne you common children, weakened the bloodline, made the kingdom vulnerable. I could give you heirs, power, political alliances through my family. My bloodline is pure, my connections extensive. I made you stronger. She gestured wildly at baby Leo, who'd started crying in the servant's arms. I gave you everything. A strong queen, a legitimate heir, the stability your kingdom needed. I secured alliances with 3 neighboring packs through my marriage to you. I brought wealth and influence that she never could have. You gave me lies, Lucius whispered. I gave you a kingdom, Isabella screamed. A throne secured by blood and power, what did she give you? Nothing. She would have dragged you down with her weakness. The logic was twisted, poisonous, but Freya could hear the sincere belief underneath. Isabella genuinely thought she'd done the right thing, that the ends justified the means, that destroying one woman's life was acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of power. It made her even more terrifying. This requires formal verification. Elder Corwin's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of someone who'd presided over pack law for decades. Blood testing. By ancient law, all children claiming royal lineage must be verified before the Moon Council. We cannot proceed on accusations alone, no matter how compelling. His words were measured, careful. He was giving Lucius an out, a way to maintain some semblance of control and due process even as his world collapsed. Lucius nodded once, sharp and absolute. Summon the blood mage. The minutes that followed felt suspended in amber. The crowd pressed closer as an elderly woman in silver robes emerged from the council chambers, carrying a carved wooden case that hummed with old magic. Her movements were ritualistic, precise, honed by decades of performing sacred rites. Freya had seen blood magic once before, at a nomming ceremony for a council member's child. The ritual was ancient, predating kingdoms and crowns, rooted in the magic that bound wolves to the moon itself. Blood didn't lie. Blood couldn't be fooled or bought or corrupted. The blood mage, Seer Kestra, Freya remembered her name now, set up her implements on a small table brought forward by servants. A crystal bowl carved from a single piece of quartz. A ceremonial blade with a silver edge that caught the light. Vials for collecting samples. Candles that she lit with a whispered word, flames springing to life without match or flint. "The accused children will come forward," Kestra intoned, her voice carrying the weight of ritual. Freya's sons stood brave and still, not even flinching when the ceremonial blade pricked their fingers. They'd practiced this too, in their own way. She taught them to be strong when it hurt, to show no weakness before those who might use it against them. Cassius first, stepping forward with his head held high. Kestra spoke words in the old tongue as she pressed the blade to his fingertip. 3 drops of blood fell into the crystal bowl, each one landing with a sound like a bell chiming. Then Titus, his analytical mind no doubt cataloging every detail of the ritual. 3 more drops, the blood mixing but not quite blending, swirling in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Finally Magnus, who bared his teeth at the blade before allowing the blood mage to prick his finger. 3 drops, and the bowl now held 9 points of blood suspended in crystalline clarity. "The father will come forward." Lucius descended from the dais, his movements controlled despite the tremor in his hands. He stood before the blood mage, and for just a moment his eyes met Freya's across the space between them. She saw everything there, horror, grief, rage, and underneath it all, the desperate hope that somehow this was all a mistake, a trick, a lie. It wasn't. Kestra pricked his finger, and 3 drops of Lucius's blood joined the bowl. The moment his blood touched the mixture, the crystal began to glow. The blood mage chanted in the old tongue, words that predated kingdoms and crowns, magic that couldn't be fooled or bought or corrupted. The language was ancient, primal, the original tongue of wolf kind before they'd split into packs and territories. The words resonated in Freya's bones, in her blood, in the marrow of her being. The crystal flared brilliant silver, the color of the Vane bloodline, the color of true alpha magic. Light exploded through the hall, so bright nobles had to shield their eyes. The silver glow cast everything in stark relief, shadows banished, truth illuminated in painful clarity. When the light finally faded, Kestra's eyes were white, pupils rolled back as she channeled the magic's verdict. Her voice rang out clear and undeniable, speaking truth that could not be questioned or contested. Cassius Ashford, 99.9% paternal match to Don Lucius Vane, Alpha King of Moonstone. The hall erupted in gasps and exclamations. Another flash of silver light, somehow even brighter. Titus Ashford, 99.9% paternal match to Don Lucius Vane, Alpha King of Moonstone. Isabella was screaming something, but her voice was lost in the roar of the crowd. A third pulse of light, this one so intense it left afterimages. Magnus Ashford, 99.9% paternal match to Don Lucius Vane, Alpha King of Moonstone. The blood mage's eyes cleared, pupils returning to normal. She looked exhausted, drained by channeling such powerful magic, but her words had been recorded by every witness present. There would be no disputing them, no claiming they were misheard or misinterpreted. The kingdom erupted. Nobles shouted over each other, voices overlapping in shock and excited speculation. Council members demanded order, banging staffs against the floor to no avail. Someone was crying, tears of joy or horror, Freya couldn't tell. Someone else was laughing hysterically at the cosmic irony of it all, the sound edging toward madness. The Alpha King had 3 legitimate heirs, 3 true sons born of his one true mate, and he'd exiled them all before they were born. He'd chosen lies over truth, ambition over love, cruelty over mercy. And now the entire kingdom knew it. But Lucius wasn't listening to the chaos around him. His gaze had fixed on baby Leo, still cradled in a servant's arms near Isabella. Something had clicked behind those ice-blue eyes, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The timing of Leo's conception, Isabella's insistence on absolute privacy during her pregnancy, the way she'd refused to let him near her for months, claiming complications that required isolation. The servants who'd been dismissed, replaced with ones loyal only to her, the locked doors and hushed conversations. He moved down the dais steps like a predator, his alpha senses finally, fully engaged. Every instinct he'd suppressed in the name of love and trust now screamed at him to look, to see, to understand. Isabella backed away, terror naked on her face, but there was nowhere to run. Guards blocked every exit. The crowd pressed closer, sensing blood in the water. Lucius took the baby from the servant's arms with surprising gentleness, brought Leo close, breathed in deeply, his alpha senses analyzing every detail his willful blindness had hidden. The color drained from his face. No, the word came out strangled, barely audible. Lucius looked at the child, really looked, seeing what willful blindness and love and desperation had hidden for months. Pale blue eyes, not vein silver. A soft button nose, nothing like the sharp, aristocratic features that marked his bloodline. The set of the jaw was wrong. The shape of the ears. Every detail screamed genetic mismatch to an alpha finally paying attention. And the scent. His gaze swept the room with predatory focus, landing on Captain Victor standing rigid near the throne. Tall, blue-eyed Victor with his soft features and broad shoulders. Victor who had been Isabella's personal guard during her pregnancy. Victor who'd been given unprecedented access to the Queen's private chambers. Victor who smelled exactly like the child in Lucius's arms, that undeniable scent of blood connection that couldn't be faked or hidden from a true alpha. The devastating truth crashed down like an avalanche. Isabella hadn't just destroyed his true mate with lies and manipulation. She'd cuckolded him, passed off another man's bastard as his heir, made him parade his betrayal before the entire kingdom while his real sons, his true heirs, survived in exile. The betrayal was complete, absolute, annihilating. Everything he'd believed, every choice he'd made, every cruel word and action, all of it built on lies stacked on treachery, so profound it defied comprehension. The sound that tore from Lucius's throat wasn't human. It was primal, anguished, the roar of a king whose entire world had just shattered around him like glass. The throne room's chandeliers swayed from the force of it, glass crystals chiming like funeral bells. Several nobles covered their ears. The sound went on, rage and betrayal and heartbreak given voice. His shift was instantaneous. One moment a man stood holding another man's child, face twisted in anguish. The next, a massive silver wolf materialized in an explosion of power and rage, 9 feet of lethal muscle and ancient bloodline fury. The transformation was violent, clothes tearing, bones restructuring with audible cracks. The baby fell safely into a servant's catching arms as Lucius's beast took full control, all rational thought consumed by instinct and fury. The temperature in the hall plummeted. Frost formed on the marble floor where the wolf stood, spreading outward in intricate patterns. This was alpha magic at its most primal, uncontrolled, devastating. Victor ran. It was instinct, pure survival instinct. He bolted for the nearest exit, shoving nobles aside in his desperation to escape. His face was white with terror, knowing exactly what was coming. He made it 3 steps before Lucius's jaws closed around his throat. The execution was brutal, savage, designed to send a message to anyone who might think to betray their king. Lucius shook Victor like a rag doll, bones snapping audibly, crack, 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 each break echoing through the silent hall. Blood sprayed across pristine white marble in arterial bursts, painting abstract patterns across the floor, the walls, the horrified faces of nobles too shocked to look away. Victor's screams cut off with horrifying finality, his windpipe crushed. His body went limp, but Lucius didn't stop, couldn't stop, his beast consumed by the need to destroy the man who'd touched his queen, who'd planted his seed and let another man claim it, who'd participated in the greatest betrayal imaginable. When Lucius finally released him, Victor's body crumpled in a broken heap, neck twisted at an impossible angle, dead eyes staring at nothing. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading across white marble like an accusation. The court stood frozen, paralyzed by shock and primal fear. Several nobles vomited, unable to contain their reaction to the violence. Others covered their children's eyes, though it was far too late to shield them from what they'd witnessed. Lucius shifted back, standing over the corpse in torn clothing that hung in tatters from his frame. Blood painted his hands, his face, dripped from his mouth like judgment made flesh. He looked like a god of vengeance pulled straight from ancient nightmares, terrible and magnificent and utterly terrifying. He stood there breathing hard, chest heaving, slowly coming back to himself. The beast receded reluctantly, rational thought fighting its way back through the haze of rage. "Arrest Isabella." His voice carried absolute authority despite its roughness, ragged from the shift and the roar. "Treason, adultery, conspiracy to murder the true Luna and heirs. She will face full trial before the Moon Council and be executed according to pack law." "No," Isabella's shriek was desperate, feral. She clawed at the guards as they seized her arms, jeweled nails drawing blood from their faces and hands. "Lucius, please, I did it for us. For the kingdom. She was nobody, nothing. I gave you everything. I made you strong. I secured alliances. You gave me lies." Each word fell like stones into a grave, final, and absolute. "Take her to the dungeons. Maximum security, no visitors, no exceptions." The guards dragged her away, her screams echoing through the hall even as the heavy doors slammed shut with terrible finality. "Lucius, Lucius, please, I love you. Everything I did was for love. Don't do this, don't." The doors cut off her pleas. Baby Leah wailed in a servant's arms, frightened by the violence and chaos, innocent of his mother's sins. The sound was heartbreaking, a child crying for comfort that would never come, for a mother being dragged to execution, for a father who wasn't really his father at all. "Dr. Hale." Lucius's attention swung to the physician still kneeling nearby, trembling violently. "You falsified royal medical records, conspired in the destruction of the true Luna, aided in the exile of my sons. You'll stand trial as well." "Mercy, my king, my family. They'll kill them if I testify." "Your family will be placed under royal protection if you testify truthfully. They will be guarded day and night, protected from any retaliation." Lucius's voice was cold but not cruel. "You will still face consequences for your actions, but mercy is possible if you cooperate fully. Refuse, and you'll die alongside Isabella." Dr. Hale nodded frantically, sobbing with relief and terror. "I'll tell you everything. Names, dates, payments. I kept records, insurance in case she turned on me. I'll give you everything." "Take him to the council chambers. Guard him well." Guards hauled the sobbing doctor away, more gently than they'd handled Isabella. The throne room descended into chaos. Courtiers fled toward exits or crowded closer, torn between escape and morbid fascination. Council members shouted for order, their voices lost in the din. Servants scrubbed desperately at Victor's blood with buckets of water and rags, but it had already soaked into grout lines, permanent as sin. No amount of cleaning would erase what had happened here. The entire political structure of the kingdom imploded in real time. Former queen arrested, heir proven illegitimate, true heirs standing in crimson suits bearing witness to their father's violence. Everything Lucius had built over 6 years revealed as foundation built on sand, on lies, on betrayal so profound it defied comprehension. Lucius stood at the center of the wreckage he'd created 6 years ago with a single choice: to believe lies over truth, cruelty over mercy, pride over love. The phantom mate bond flared in his chest, that severed connection reaching desperately across the void for something irretrievably broken, and he finally, fully comprehended what he'd destroyed. His eyes found Freya across the chaos and carnage. She stood exactly where she'd been throughout the entire scene, unmoving, untouchable, watching him with eyes that held no forgiveness, no mercy, only cold satisfaction. Her sons flanked her like sentinels, 3 perfect mirrors of himself, judging him and finding him wanting. And his legs gave out. The Alpha King collapsed to his knees in Victor's blood, the red soaking into his torn clothing, staining his hands and knees. The most powerful man in 3 territories knelt in the consequences of his choices, broken before the mate he'd destroyed and the sons he'd never known. Around them, the kingdom watched their Alpha fall. The Alpha King kneels broken before the mate he destroyed and the sons he never knew. The question burning through every witness's mind, through every corner of the kingdom, is the same one that matters most. What happens next? Will Freya grant forgiveness to the man who threw her away, or will she walk away and leave him with nothing but the ashes of his choices? This story isn't just Freya's. It's yours too. Every person who's ever been rejected, underestimated, cast aside, and told they weren't enough. Every person who rose from those ashes stronger than anyone expected. Every person who watched someone realize too late exactly what they'd thrown away. You know this story because you've lived your own version of it. So now I want to hear from you. Are you Team Freya, believing she should walk away with her head high and her sons by her side? Or are you Team Second Chance, thinking even the worst mistakes deserve a path to redemption? What would Lucius have to do to earn forgiveness, if such a thing is even possible? And most importantly, what's your own rejection to redemption story? When did someone underestimate you, and how did you prove them wrong? The answers to these questions matter because they shape what comes next. Part 2 of this story is coming, and it will answer everything you're wondering right now. Will Freya forgive the unforgivable? How will Cassius, Titus, and Magnus react to the father who never knew they existed? What happens to Isabella in the dungeons, and what becomes of innocent baby Leo? Can a severed mate bond ever truly be restored, or are some breaks too fundamental to heal? If you want those answers, if you need to know how Freya's story ends, then make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Share this story with anyone who loves powerful heroines, karmic justice, and the sweet satisfaction of watching someone realize exactly what they lost. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't just success. The best revenge is showing up with living proof that you were never the problem.